The Japanese Grand Prix is done and dusted. Max Verstappen wins again in Japan. But let's talk about the race in general. Here is the Japanese Grand Prix race recap. What's going on, you guys? It is your boy, the American F1 fan, Eric Ringle here, and I'm back. We're doing a race recap this week as we didn't do a live stream. I've been fighting some sinus infections here in the state of Texas. The pollen is, oh God, it's been bad. But let's talk about the Japanese Grand Prix today. Max Verstappen with a pretty dominant victory in Japan. Sergio Perez was about 13 seconds behind, which is really good for Sergio Perez. He had another really good race. And it seems like the Melbourne race just a couple weeks ago was kind of just a one-off for Red Bull, as Red Bull looked very dominant today. But, you know, you had the Red Bulls finish 1-2, then you had the Ferraris and Carlos Sainz and Charles Leclerc finish 3-4, and this race, I think, was literally all down to one thing, and that was strategy. On lap one, we saw the crash between Daniel Ricciardo and Alexander Albon, and this is one of those that was just, it was this racing, an unfortunate racing incident from Daniel Ricciardo's end. You know, he was trying to take the racing line going into the S's, and he just clips Alexander Albon, takes both of them out of the race into the tire barrier, which gives us a red flag in the race. And this is where we started to see differing strategies come out from all the different teams. You had Max Verstappen go on to another set of mediums. You had, really, it was almost the top five, except for Charles Leclerc, who went on to a set of hard tires, which he basically then served out the two different tire compound rule. But you had everybody else go on to another set of the same tires that they started the race on. And there for a while, you were starting to see these differing strategies come out, and it almost seemed like McLaren, they were trying to find a way to get ahead of Ferrari the entire day. They were, you know, they pit Lando Norris a little bit earlier than Carlos Sainz, and initially it had worked, but there was such a tire offset between when Lando Norris pit to when Carlos Sainz pit in both pit stops that Carlos Sainz just had the much quicker speed. But then we saw the differing strategy on Charles Leclerc's end, where they gave him a one-stop strategy, which I think worked like a charm. Charles started the race in 8th, gained a position right before the red flag, but then at the end of the race, you could see that Charles Leclerc had the speed all throughout and was able to finish in 4th place. Now, when you look down further in the results, you see Fernando Alonso finishing 6th place. This was a great fight for 6th, 7th, and 8th positions between George Russell, Fernando Alonso, and Oscar Piastri. This, I mean, was one of the fights to watch, especially coming down the last 10 to 15 laps of the race. Fernando Alonso pulling his best Carlos Sainz impression, trying to give Oscar Piastri the DRS to keep him fighting George Russell and to keep George Russell behind the both of them. Unfortunately, though, Oscar Piastri makes a couple mistakes into the chicane going on to the front stretch, and George Russell was able to get past him. But this fight was really, really good, and really kind of gave you a little bit of excitement. But Fernando Alonso did an amazing job today. They differed his strategy. He started on the softs, stayed on the softs, and really did a fantastic job, not really gaining any positions, but not really losing anything either. Now, we also have to look at the beginning of the race where we saw Lewis Hamilton struggling for pace compared to George Russell, and you saw Lewis Hamilton, who we know typically will fight for positions, but he immediately called over the radio, "Do you want me to let George pass?" Because he could tell very early on that George had more pace than him, and he was wanting Mercedes to try to get as much in the way of points as they could. And so by letting George Russell pass, this really kind of helped out George's race. And you could tell that Lewis there was just something not right with Lewis and the car. We don't know necessarily yet what it was, but you could just tell that Lewis just didn't have the pace, and smartly enough, he realized that and let George Russell pass. And I think that really helped the fact that George Russell got that 7th place finish. And now we have to talk about the homeboy himself. Yuki Tsunoda gets a point today at the Japanese Grand Prix. And after the first lap, or on the start of the race, Yuki Tsunoda and Daniel Ricciardo both dropped several positions off the start. And I don't know if it was boiled down to, whether or not he had enough, heat in the tires, but he dropped a lot of positions. It brought up Nico Hülkenberg into the top 10, but after that red flag, you could tell that the RBs really had some pace to them. And again, with this race coming down to strategy, I think the Red Bull, or not Red Bulls, but the RBs had a really good strategy for Yuki, and he was able to hold that position, for a majority of the race. Lance Stroll strapped on a set of softs towards the end of the race, but I think you could kind of tell that he waited too long to try to use those softs to his advantage. He got up to 11th place. It looked like maybe for a little bit he was going to be able to chase down Yuki Tsunoda, but he ended up dropping back behind Nico Hülkenberg and finished in 12th position. But Lance Stroll had a really good fight back from where he started the race at. It's just unfortunate that he wasn't able to use those soft tires to his advantage. Now, talking about those cars that finished just outside the top 10, obviously you had Nico Hülkenberg just finish outside of the points in 11th place. Finished about 6 seconds back of Yuki Tsunoda. I was starting to wonder if Yuki's tires were going off because he was dropping a lot of time. And it may have also been potentially with blue flags. But Yuki was able to hold on for that 10th place. But you had Nico Hülkenberg finishing 11th. Like I said, after that pass with 2 laps to go on Lance Stroll started to drop back of Nico. Then you had Kevin Magnussen finish in 13th. Kevin Magnussen was really good all day, having fights with the Saubers. It looks like Sauber may have made some improvements with some of the updates that they brought to the Japanese Grand Prix, as Valtteri looked very quick this weekend, and it looked like he was able to really start bringing the fight against the Haas's and against the RBs. Unfortunately, Guan Yu Zhou, though, had to retire from the race early on with a gearbox issue. Don't know necessarily what that issue yet is. Was it attested to an electronics issue that was hindering the gearbox? We haven't quite heard the word yet on that, but Guan Yu Zhou ended up having to retire early on in the race. And then you had the Alpines, basically finishing almost dead last. You can just tell they've got no speed, and even with the upgrades they brought this weekend, had it not been for a Logan Sargent, mistake in the Degnas, in the middle of the race, they would have literally finished dead last of the finishers of this race. And we got to talk about Logan Sargent. I think, not including the mistake he made in the middle of the race, I think Logan Sargent had a decent race today. He showed that he's got the skill to be able to pass cars. He was passing cars on a regular basis. Like I said, except for that mistake, we could have seen a Logan Sargent finishing in 13th, 14th position because he really had some pace today. And, like I said, mistakes happen. It's not helpful to Logan, especially with, what Williams is having to do, with only 2 chassis. Now with Alexander Albon's crash, are they going to have a second car available for the Chinese Grand Prix in just a week's time? Are they going to, sit Logan again if they can't get that car fixed in time? The little mistakes like the one he made today in the Degnas at Japan, it really kind of hinders him, when people want to fight for his name and say, oh, yes, he does deserve a spot in Formula One. Those mistakes need to go away, Logan. So once again, Max Verstappen is your winner in Japan. The podium was Max Verstappen, Sergio Perez, and Carlos Sainz. And, you now got to start to wonder at Ferrari, are they going to start to treat Carlos Sainz as the number one driver? Or is it still going to be a Charles Leclerc team and, Carlos Sainz is just going to have to do it on its own? But, that question now needs to start to be raised of who they're going to treat as the number one driver going forward. But guys, let me know what you guys thought of the Japanese Grand Prix in the comments section down below. Guys, as always, slap a like on my videos. Helps this video get out to more and more Formula One fans. And guys, if you are new to my channel, please hit that subscribe button. We are on the move to 500 subscribers, so please hit that subscribe button if you guys are new. But guys, thank you so much for watching this video. And guys, for the American F1 fan, I'm Eric Ringel, signing off.